video that really tells our story, and we'll use it in a variety of ways, but it certainly will also be, it will be available on the new website that someone can find out what our school is about. We are going to boost our involvement with traditional advertising, and we've done some things with the Argonaut in the past, mostly in the spring. We're going to be pushing in the fall as well. So the Argonaut is traditional, but it does hit our local West Side area. Another group that we're working with is called LA Parent, and we're going to be adding to the LA Parent Education Guide and also the LA Parent online directory. And so those are two pieces of traditional type advertising that we're going to be beefing up and increasing. I believe in the budget there was a $10,000 amount that was set. So we have to do the second half of the video production. That's a part of that, and all of these things that we're doing for the fall. And we need to save some money for the spring, but we'll try to keep within that $10,000. If we feel that this is working and we want more, we will come to the board and ask beyond that. But for right now, that's where we stand with traditional advertising. What's new is social media, and we began launching into social media at the end of last year. We have now named a new social media coordinator who was actually doing the work last year, Nazmia Akbaba, and she is now, we've built in a stipend that is for the work that she's going to be doing this year. And the focus is on Instagram and Twitter, and pushing out and building the size of the audience that we have in those areas. She pushes things out on Instagram, and Twitter is the tag along that goes with it, so everything goes out to both those areas. But we're using social media for a specific purpose. It is not to push out in another place about what's happening in next week, or is it pre-uniform, pre-dress day, or events, or talking about the valet line and those kind of things. That we have already systems in place. What we will be doing is using it to tell the story, the heart of what this school is about. And so that's what social media is going to be used for, and we've already started in that direction in telling about events and showing pictures of students and showing pictures of staff that are telling about what it means to be a student at our school, what it means to be a parent or part of the family here. And so that's what our social media is going to be pushing out.
Can I ask a question about social? Is that meant to be Instagram and Facebook? Because Twitter is not really the storytelling platform for social. Like Twitter is kind of a dead social platform.
Yeah, we're certainly open to whatever is going to work. Right now, we have it set up as Twitter as a follow-along account. So Instagram was our true message, and so Twitter was an add-on. But we certainly can look at Facebook. We would need to look at what Facebook account. GPA has a Facebook account. We possibly could create our own as well, a separate one that's specific through administration. So we have options.
Okay.
And I think one of the things you had mentioned was looking at advertising through social media.
Yeah.
And so we are definitely looking at that as well. Yeah. So along with traditional, we want to look at yes.
I don't know, and you probably look at this, and it's not my area, but I know the principal in the local school in Venice, he posts stuff to the Venice Moms group. And so I'm sure there's other moms groups. Not to say that moms are the only ones that matter here, but those exist. I think it'd be good to seek those out, and then that's a good place to tell your story, because those are people who might be interested to come next year or the following year, whenever it is. And I've seen the work for Westminster Elementary School, because there was a little turnaround there in terms of getting more local kids to come to that school, and that was real inroads, and it was pretty effective for them. So just another.
And one of the things also is using influencers that are that we have here that can reach out to others. The key thing though is that we have consistent messaging, and I'll drop down to the last talking point. We can get our message diluted or even convoluted if we don't have consistent messaging. So we're gonna work off talking points, we're gonna make sure that we have a system in place for communication, and that's gonna be my next slide. But absolutely, I think you're right, that's a direction that we can go and augment.
To Pete's point too, a lot of those groups exist within Facebook, so understanding that consistent messaging would be developed. If that content lived in Facebook, it would make it a more organic experience to share, to go into those like Moms of Westchester groups and Moms of Playa, which are, you know, they talk about schools consistently. It's a constant topic.
Campus tours, we've been giving them for years, but we also need to update our materials. We also want to update the actual presentation. So we're going to be, as an administrative group, talking about how we're going to be adding to that. I would love to see at least one parent at our tours who can help out and talk parent to parent. So we'll see what we can come up with, but more to come on our campus tours and local recruitment fairs as well. So we haven't got a list yet of what we'll be doing this fall, but there'll be plenty of days and nights we'll be out plugging for marketing and outreach. So a lot of things that we're heading towards. I'm hitting my 20-minute limit, so I'm going to keep moving.
Do we have anything like I don't know if they let you do it, but like at the German consulate, is there like a little Goethe poster or something? I mean, I don't know, that's I know that's new technology, but
Like posters and banners.
well, just something that you know, we'll go in there and have something to do with Germany, and that seems like a good place to have some sort of presence.
I think we're on that list. Just not great plan. Two concerns we may want to address as part of it is the diversity piece of it, and who we are marketing to and who has access to the media, because we don't want to be marketing to an exclusive tech and study audience.
You could do regional.
Yeah, you know, but what I'm trying to say is
Not everybody is on.
not everybody is on this, and there are certain diversity goals we need to reach, and so to be mindful of incorporating them into the communication strategy, that you can actually have evidence of proof, so you have proof or evidence to say we marketed to the following group and here's why, and this is what we've drawn from, because we need to build up that database in order to prove that we did market to the right audiences as well.
One other suggestion I just wanted to mention was, is there an opportunity to market to local preschools? Because those are, you know, the feeder opportunities that we would have for TK and kindergarten. And to Frank's point, there may be. Sorry. Local preschools was the example, because they're naturally, elementary school is top of mind for them. And so having marketing materials or having that with the directors of the schools might be an opportunity. But to Frank's point of diversity, there are probably some preschools that have a more diverse.
Yeah, but they are not only preschool for $1,300 a month, right? So there must be other
Right.
preschools who have like maybe a $500 tab, or even like have a different get-in premium. So we just don't want to get our hands in a cookie jar. We only market it to the affluent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be mindful of the fact that we market also to the people who may not have access to all these tools we have access to.
State preschool. I'm sure there's a state preschool there.
Yeah. So just as a point of
Points well taken.
There was an effort last year made towards doing some outreach to Mar Vista Gardens. Did anything come back? Do you know?
We just had an initial meeting last year, but I can follow up with that as well.
On that one,
because that would be an example.
One comment, I think in Mar Vista Garden there is a woman who runs an organization, and you know it's like everybody goes there when the Clintons come to town. You know, they go there to Mar Vista, and there is somebody who is really at the core of the Mar Vista Gardens who is an influencer over there. It would be good to reach out to that. I don't know who that is, but I've heard about it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to communication strategies update. So this is the other one I wanted to highlight, and these two, they're they're tied together. So we need to have proper communication to be able to market ourselves properly. And what you'll be seeing is that I, as executive director, I'm gonna be the gatekeeper. Things are gonna run through me, and it's not because, power I wanna have all that. We just have to have consistency. And so I will be that point person for all of communication and making sure that it's going the way we want and expect it to do. So you'll see it in the coming months. You will see an internal communication plan that'll come to you, and that's how we deal with the board, our staff and administration, the GPA, and the many committees. And I mean, we have many committees here, making sure that they're all talking to each other. And who's going to be the one at all of those spots? It's going to be me, so that I can know if this committee's talking about this and they're talking about it also, instead of going off in different directions, they can maybe work together. And so that's the plan there. So you'll be getting an actual internal communications plan. Similarly, an external communications plan, and part of this will include social media and where does that fit in, and where are we going to go. But this is for both our what we're pushing out to the public by the way of our families, which is one external communication, but specifically beyond our families, what's out there to the public. And so that'll be the second plan that you'll be getting, and this will include social media, again, as that means to share our story and to build our advertising base as well. So.
It's just one comment on the internal communication with the board. I would encourage you to have standing meetings scheduled with board members. I mean, you work basically through the board presidents, but there's a certain danger to that, because then the board president can be sucked into it, and so we need to just make sure that there is between management and governance. And we are big on processes, so I encourage you to have standing meetings, and if you have standing meetings, then you can summarize it and then share with the rest of the board that information is being separated, equally. If the information has been equally, disseminated among the board members. So think about it, how you want to handle it.
I appreciate those comments, and just know that at the end of this meeting also that's scheduled, we're going to have a brief time to talk about how things are going thus far. We're all just trying to figure each other out. I'm brand new to this as well here, and so we want to figure those things out. I certainly want to initially just meet on a personal level with each of the board members, and have met with most everyone, and separately and individually. But I agree that we want to have that as a regular and ongoing piece of what we do. I also want to be sure my communication out to the whole board is in systems that make sense. So if we could save that to when later at the agenda to kind of talk about that, what our processes are.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Frank. Okay, and that ends my ED report. Did I make time?
A little over, we'll forgive you.
Okay.
He'll just have to cut some of this.
Are there, I would just like to share that Chris and I, in one of our initial conversations at the beginning of July, when we talked about making sure that that there's a plan in place, and the board's responsibility to make sure that the plan is going smoothly. My direction to Chris was to clearly outline what success means to him and what success means to the organization. I want to be able to use his focus areas and his key deliverables, which I shared with you in the Dropbox, as part of Chris's evaluation on how far we've come along, and these goals were shared mutually by myself and Chris based on his experience with the organization so far. So it's important to me that we set him up for success, and he knows what that looks like, and we also know what that looks like for the organization. So thank you for I think one of the things we wanted to avoid was a laundry list, but I think that is what we have. So we're going to start doing laundry very, very quickly.
So I'm looking at the cheat sheet, and I looked at the executive director document. It's a good starting point. You know, it's color coded and it's strike through. And you know, what's missing is probably a little bit of a prioritization at this point. So I encourage you to work on a prioritization. What is like your first 100 days, and so how you're going to tackle it, because you can't do everything at once, right? And so it's impossible.
So
Absolutely, and if where I'd like that to flow in is the board calendar.
The calendar.
So how we develop that board calendar really sets my priorities, because it says we're going to be doing this in November and we're going to wait on that until April.
Yeah, okay. But you need to just prioritize.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's a pretty laundry list here.
Because it all needs to get done.
needs to get done. All right, are there any other discussion items regarding Chris's points? All right, then we will be moving on to item 5B, discussion of policy support for foreign teacher visa.
Okay, the reason why we added this on here is I just want the board to be aware that there are some costs that are coming up related to our past practice of supporting our foreign teachers in navigating into the system that allows them to stay, both their credentialing and also visas. And that has been a practice in the past. I feel, and I'll give my opinion on this, I feel it's a very wise decision of the practice that we've done in the past, because it provides stability. It is very difficult to get, in particular our German-speaking teachers, and to have consistency, and to be able to have people at various points in the visa process, to have the importance of having their employer showing that they require this person to be here. And so by the board putting forth funding to help that happen, it sets up for success teachers to be able to stay and continue in our employ. I do have we have a couple of our teachers who are in the process right now, and we don't actually have a large number that are in the pipeline. So I don't think it's something that's going to be huge or looming, but I know of a $2,500 expense that I'm planning to approve that's coming up that will support one employee. There are many other pieces to this, and I thought it would be worthwhile to at least have a discussion at the board level is that something the board is planning to continue as we move forward in the coming years. And I'll put it out there, I think it's a very wise decision and that we've done in the past, and I encourage that we do continue with that. With that, I'll be quiet and give it to the discussion.
I'd just like to point out that even though we try to run our meetings as efficiently as possible and things show up on the activity calendar, this was very last minute. I also felt it's important to state that it is a policy that we've supported before. It's just not official and it's not documented. And Chris and I share the vision that it is, being an international charter school and to retain quality teachers from Germany or other countries, that it is something that we should draft, even though it's not a looming problem, just to have it for the future. Frank, anything else?
No comment. Great.
So I had a couple things. So I agree it's obviously difficult to get qualified teachers from Germany. So I think before unilaterally approving to support the process and pay for the visa process, I think we do want to make certain, of course, this is a teacher that you actually want to keep. So I think there should be a stipulation that they have had a successful evaluation, and otherwise it would be somewhat, you don't want to keep a person just because it's a warm body, you want to keep a person that's going to be effective. So I think there should be some qualifications to whether or not we support them for a visa. And I think, and this is something we hadn't thought of previously, you may have, and maybe I missed it or it was before my time. There's a question of equity for teachers that don't require visas. Right, so now we're giving extra money to teachers who are, and maybe that's not an issue, But one day it could be an issue where a teacher that doesn't require a visa says, well, wait a second, how come this teacher's getting an extra $2,500 or $5,000 or whatever it is for their performance and I'm not getting anything? So I think we ought to have, think about ahead of time what the policy is in general. So is it that a certain pot of money is made available that is used for your visa, which is like professional development in some sense, right? It allows you to be professional here in the United States. Or for someone who doesn't require a visa, do we say there's a certain pot of money available? And it doesn't have to be the same amount, one could look at weigh that. But is there something available for professional development for something so that there's, a sense of equity across all of the teachers? Which I realize is raising budget issues, but you also want to have equity among them. And I'm not saying there's any discord among them or anything, but let's plan ahead before that time comes when it is. So,
I agree with you. I think it is a good idea to provide this assistance, but within the parameters that I think Pete's talking about, I think would make a good policy.
I also agree, considering Goethe is a very worldly school, it is a great advantage that we have teachers that are from all over the world, and so we should support that. One thing, as you're thinking about criteria, is if there's something within that policy that says you would have been with Goethe for a certain number of years and or commit to another certain number of years with Goethe, because the last thing you'd want is to help a teacher get their visa and support that and pay for it financially, and then they're gone in 6 months, and then it's all for naught.
And to that point, I believe we do something similar to that with regard to our BITSA program, which it is available for all teachers, which is the Beginning Teacher Support program. And so, and I believe, I think that we require a 2-year commitment. Yeah, and so maybe we could do something like that with our teachers who are applying for these. That's a great idea.
All right, if there are no further comments, Chris, please proceed on developing a policy and bringing it back to the board.
Okay, add it to the laundry list. Is that
That's
what
Right.
you're saying?
Yeah. What priority is it?
Yeah. Then I will, and I'll move forward
Yeah.
with the ones that are pressing right now.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item 5C, conflict of interest. So, one of the changes in our legal compliance that has arisen and we need to address is that we need to adopt our own conflict of interest code and policy. The state legislature voted earlier this year to treat charter schools similar to a local government. And it has now become a compliance requirement so that every charter school has its own code of conflict of interest code. It's pretty straightforward. It's a disclosure of financial statements. It includes the same things that we've done before with the Form 700. However, it is a little bit more clear. It's a little bit more enumerated that says, for example, board members can't participate in votes if they have a financial interest in a vendor or a consultant. That also school administrators can't negotiate in contract negotiations if they're really affected. The interesting thing about this, the conflict of interest code that I'm presenting is, first of all, it's been approved by legal. They vetted it, but we would actually be dovetailing the Fair Political Commissions Act that actually supports conflict of interest. So that would mean that usually conflict of interest codes are revisited every 2 or 3 years by city governments or governing boards. But in this case, as long as when they change their conflict of interest laws, we just fall in line with it. So I would recommend we adopt it. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through the 40 pages. I actually did. It's nothing I don't feel is controversial, but I'll open it up to discussion.
Question on this one. So what was posted on the Dropbox is the actual, it says, the conflicts of interest code from legal, so legal where? What is that document which was posted there?
So it's the PDF, so there's two parts. One is an actual statement that
So sign-off sheet,
that
yeah.
sign-off sheet, right? Then it's a description and a preamble of the conflict of interest and the act. And the next part is this, the FPPC 18730, which is the actual provision of the conflict of interest,
Okay, and then the other one, bring up the other one again.
the Word document. Yep.
Yeah. So the Word document is just basically a request, which is that we acknowledge to right to have read this document.
Exactly. So all board members would sign this, consultants, we talked about vendors, Kristen from the vendor policy agreement in a few minutes, they would sign that. There are some disclosure categories here, which I will show you right now, is executive director, principal director of operations, and working consultants that they would be also asked to disclose and sign. Okay. That being said, is there a motion to adopt the conflict of interest policy?
So,
Second.
Can we ask questions?
after we.
Oh,
after we-
okay, sorry.
Okay.
All right,
Now
open it up to
discuss.
discussion. Frank, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I haven't read the entire document today. Should have, but I haven't read the 20 pages. So I have no questions
Okay.
at this stage.
Pete?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate.
Margaret?
Is this standard, what was used, the language that was used here, like who drafted it, and where did
The
where did
language
that-
was drafted by legal
Okay.
and myself with legal counsel, and then the code itself is from the airport officials.
So what I haven't read the code, that's what I meant to say.
Oh, the 18730, that's,
Yes,
yeah, that's,
so that document,
Very
I was
basic.
like, where it's coming from.
anything further? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
I abstain.
Thanks, Dave.
okay. This motion passes. 2019-2020.
Just to vote on that was 3-0. It's 3-0-2.
3-2.
Three for yes, 2 abstain, 2 abstentions.
0.
Yep, 0 nays. Yep. Pete. All right, 2019-2020 board goals, assignments, and priorities. So for planning purposes, I prepared a document that outlines our shared goals and in the attempt to organize our meetings more effectively and prevent as many surprises as possible. We already had one today that came up. So I've prepared an activity calendar which outlines month by month what we're planning to do, and the first page of it is actually the overarching I guess, laundry list for the board that we have. So I covered this in July, a few meetings ago, and part of this document is formulated based on my experience on the board last year. So there are authorizer and compliance requirements that we have to have as a board. So that's on there. As Chris mentioned, there are also priorities based on policy that I've recognized as of last year, but also really a focus towards students and student achievement and reporting on student metrics. So, for example, something that just came up in July was the adoption of a vendor policy and agreement, which we're gonna hopefully adopt today. But very close to that as far as prioritization is establishing and monitoring student achievement, item number 9. Dovetailing that with our LCAP goals, which again, part of the organization of it, if you go to the following pages of the actual calendar, you can see that our August meeting is highlighted there. So, you know, one of the things I did when I was creating this document, working with Chris, was, Chris, are you going to be able to evaluated our test results and our LCAP targets by August 19th. And he said, "You've got to be kidding me." But it is a priority, so it is going on the September board meeting, so that we can begin having that conversation. Other items that came up include adopting a teacher improvement roadmap, where there is a policy and a plan in place to monitor teachers and retain quality teachers and help improve struggling educators at this organization. So it's pretty straightforward. I sent this out to everyone. I believe there was a comment from Danielle on adding something regarding the strategic planning, and I believe I did. Item 23, review alignment with strategic plan and review next steps. So that will be discussed. We're going to go back to our strategic plan, do an assessment of where we are with it, and see how much we've accomplished, how much there is left to accomplish, and then the board can decide on next steps as far as the strategic plan. Danielle, you'd also mentioned the board governance
Can I
committee.
add a comment? Because my comment was actually develop and adopt a 2020 to 2025 strategic plan. So it wasn't quite what that bullet point was.
Correct. And so the strategic plan that's in place, I did a preliminary look at it, and of the, I think, 80 deliverables or 90 deliverables, I think we've accomplished maybe 10 or some number.
Right, I've reviewed it as well.
So my suggestion would be to first do an assessment of what that plan is, and before investing in developing a new strategic plan, kind of do a benchmark on how much we've accomplished. I'm not opposed to developing a new plan, but let's just meet and see where we are and how far we have to go, and then we can meet and decide, how to get there.
So you wouldn't be open to considering how we would develop the 2020 to 2025?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I'm saying absolutely, yeah.
Okay. But using that as inspiration?
The
old-
original, right, exactly.
Okay, so
Because
you're
they're-
auditing the old one and then perhaps developing a new one based off of that?
Correct, and well, assessing it,
Mhm.
and then seeing how much, like for example, one of the things on there is opening the middle years program, but it's in its infancy, so, but yes, absolutely considering developing a new plan. Okay. All right, so, is there a motion to adopt?
I had another comment too, that was, I added another bullet point, which was establish and appoint a governance committee.
Yes, that's actually on there. According to the bylaws, it's actually called a board development committee, and that is, let me see.
26 and
Yeah, it's 26, 24. Reestablish board development committee, charter, appoint members.
I see. It's a different,
Just a different name, right?
okay. Yeah, okay.
With the governance and parentheses.
That's a good idea. Thank you. Put governance in parentheses.
Governance and parentheses.
Good
That's a
idea.
good idea.
That's where it gets lost pretty easily.
Yep. Okay. Right.
I'm not on the board, but can I ask for clarification on number 28 about the DVR? What do you mean by that?
Can we make it bigger?
That means,
So we had our DVR this year,
yep.
and it's just an audit. It's really nothing for the board to consider. It's just letting us know what we're doing well. So we can, next time we have a DVR, or I can share last year's DVR with you. But I don't know what needs to be considered at the board level.
It was considered last year, so that's why we made it onto this list. So if there are recommendations, then we'll hear it. If there are not, then we'll
do that.
Exactly. All right. Is there a motion to approve? Second? Pete, all in favor? Moving on. Board orientation guide. another very long document. All right, so the purpose of this document is really for first-year board members. It is based on my observations of this board and its practices. It's really our guidebook. Talks about best practices and good governance and roles and responsibilities. You can, if you start getting into the details of the document, one of the things that's really important is the relationship of board members with the executive director. However, you can also see that one of the weaknesses in the organization is roles and responsibilities of actual officers of the board. It is something that we can review this year, but I wanted one document, one place where we as board members and as we get new board members can highlight what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, and where we all need to strive to be better. Ultimately, I also find it kind of a strangely relatable document. There are sections on it about being a board member and becoming a public versus a private figure, and other things that are unique to our organization. I hope it brings some value to anyone who's read it. I don't know who has, but I bring it forth because I think it would be of value to new board members as we go out there and recruit talent for the organization. That being said, I will open it up to discussion. Frank, do you have anything
It summarizes, in regards to agenda setting, so isn't the agenda setting rule that we circulate the agenda 5 days before?
Yes. 5 days before, I'm sorry.
5 days before the meeting that we circulate the agenda. Have we not decided to do this?
5 days?
5
That's
days,
pretty-
so
I
3
thought it
days
was
before-
Friday before Monday.
We need to post it, the agenda. Friday, but to circulate the agenda for input.
So
with the board members.
So let's talk about that in our section about preparing for board meetings.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that Chris and I want to make sure we do is we're getting you the agenda well in advance, not just 5 days, but we'll cover it. But
Typically, it's the executive director and the board president who come up with the agenda, not
And
the
then-
whole board.
But can't we weigh in on topics?
Well,
Or-
you can, but I mean, it's not, I don't think
But
it's
isn't
required,
that-
it's an added step in the whole, I mean, if you want it done quickly, it's waiting for input is, I don't feel that it's necessary, because if you're in tune with what's going on, I don't have a problem with it being taken care of.
I just wanna have a safety valve for, that we're not having a situation where the agenda cannot be changed.
But you
No,
can change
that's-
it, in the beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, and there's always,
Yeah, you can always amend it
Yeah.
at the beginning of the meeting.
Can we discuss a topic though that's not listed on the agenda? I thought you can't.
No, you
It's
can't.
on
No,
public
you
side.
can't.
Yeah,
So then you need to get it on the
then
agenda.
you can wait a month for the next agenda.
So let's
Yeah.
the document, we can talk about the agenda setting.
Yeah,
If you
because
want
that's
to,
what-
we'll
Yeah.
cover that later. But just one of my goals is to obviously have board activity calendar so we all know what's gonna be in every board meeting. Well in advance, so if there's anything that's missed, Frank added to it. That document is not in stone, I just wanna make it very clear. Things can come onto it at any time if you guys wanna check the status of something or why something is not gonna be in September versus November or vice versa. Feel free to put it in. I always believe in over communicating than under communicating, so if you don't wanna get an email on the agenda 5 times, just delete the email. But Chris and I will talk about just prepping for the board meetings, and doing it more efficiently and making sure everyone knows what we're meeting about and why and when, give everyone an opportunity.
Can I ask you a question about that though? Who's the ultimate decider of when we do have feedback on something, whether that feedback is accepted or not? Because I think the example of the strategic plan, something that I felt strongly about, it was denied, right? But we didn't have like a formal discussion on should we add the development of the 2020 to 2025 strategic plan as an action item?
If you just hang on one
No,
second,
I'm just-
I know,
okay.
so let's start with, Frank.
Yeah, I'm just worried about the fact that the agenda, which we discussed in the public meeting, is just controlled by 2 people. ultimately. And I just wanna have an avenue and a way to get things on the agenda, which they may occur. I'm not planning to be obstructionist, but I'm worried about the fact that the two of you are just controlling the agenda setting policy. And it's whoever is a marketing major, whoever sets the agenda is in control of the communication. So there needs to be a, maybe I don't understand it properly, but there needs to be a way that the individual board members are being encouraged to process and getting it in. So I'm not understanding the process, what you mean by a document, and how we're gonna get something on the agenda which we wanna discuss for. So that's a neat point.
So let me address that first.
Mhm.
So this activity calendar, okay?
Sure.
These are our shared goals,
Right.
okay? This is, right here, for September, is what's going to be in the September meeting.
No, well, I get that.
Okay,
concept, yeah.
so if you have anything to add to the September meeting, add it there. And we'll,
Where is the document?
Chris will,
So, and let me, I think I can clarify.
Okay.
We're gonna try to have several methodologies for you to do it, anyone on the board to provide input for the meeting, for the agenda. And one of which is at the end of each meeting. You'll notice on the agenda right now, there is a proposed topics for next board meeting. So there's always gonna be a standing spot in our monthly meeting about, hey, I want this on next month. Now, we may not be a month ahead in our thinking, so that's not the last chance to do that.
Okay.
So what I'm proposing that we do is after a meeting that I meet with the board president to start developing the next agenda. That gets pushed out probably, what I'm hoping is 2 weeks in advance of the board meeting. Gets pushed out to all the board members, and I can be the one to push that out to everyone. And the way I push things out is through email. Is I send them out where you're able to only reply back to me, so that there's no Brown Act violations. You're not replying to the whole board, but that way you know where it's coming, and it's coming back to me. If like that's something I would be sharing that with the board president. We would be developing the agenda based on that input. And if there were something else that you thought, and it's later after that you wanted, contact me to see if we can put that onto the agenda. In the end, it is, according to the bylaws, it is the board president and the executive director who determine you make a final decision, but absolutely, I mean, we don't want to get into
Yeah, I'm not
issues
debating
of
the
not being
goodwill.
able to share.
I'm just debating the goodwill. We have had incidents, and we have history where things were not incidentally or willfully not get on the agenda.
Sure.
The weak point in this whole discussion is that the board doesn't know what was discussed between you and the board president. So if we close that loop and say we have discussed the following items and you can include in your meetings, then we have more content about which the agenda was developed. Because if you don't get the content of what was discussed in the meeting between two of you, how would we know how to set the agenda? All I get is information from my sources in the community that say, hey, this is going on, right? And I'm not sure, like I back off from it. But I'd rather not receive that information. I'd rather have transparency in the conversation between you, so that I know what was discussed. Hence my initial thought about it is, if you have I think it would be advisable that everybody of us sits together with you on a rolling basis in standing
We
meetings.
can't do that.
Individually.
Well, yeah, but that defeats what you're saying. It's like, you wanna know what's been discussed between them, but we
So-
can't, I mean,
No, I'm not
Yeah.
saying, I'm just a little bit
Yeah.
nervous
I,
about it.
and I get it that there has been
There's
all
been
kinds of
some-
stuff in the past, and we're trying to, this is a new day. With that,
Forget
but
what happened
if I
in the
could,
past.
what I really want to be sure is like, we have to be very wary of Brown Act. So the fact that we have it on the agenda for next month, and we're gonna have a calendar that says what's next month, it's the perfect opportunity for us to discuss openly, what are we gonna do next month at this month's meeting? So that we can do because you're right, if you don't have the conversation, who knows? And, well, I'm certainly promising to you, I am not going to be going down that dark road that we've been in the past. I do feel the more we can be transparent and the more we can do it in open session and talking and where we're not breaking any Brown Act violations, that's the best. But certainly, to Margie's point, I should be that point person so that as an advocate for each of you as an individual board member to make sure that your voice is heard.
Yes, so hang on, if I may, let's, the motion that I'm trying to get passed is the adoption of the board orientation guide. It's a piece of document that is a guidebook for board members. There's two parts to it. One is obviously the document itself. The other part is it's an appendix that has all our bylaws, all our codes, our agenda setting policy, code of conduct, et cetera, All of these documents in the appendix obviously can be modified by the board, changed, et cetera. But we will talk about the board meetings and the preparation. It is slated to have that conversation later on in the discussion. I agree with Chris and everything that's been said as far as transparency, making sure everyone knows what's happening in board meetings. So I suggest we get back to the business at hand, which is this document, and then we can talk about
but as part of the document is to adopt, if we adopt these guidelines, then we adopt the board meeting agenda development policy, right? This is
No, the agenda setting policy is set.
Yes.
It is not in that document.
It is in
It just talks about best practices on what for a board developing a board.
So am I reading the appendix incorrectly? That the Geeks orientation document, there is on page. This is actually the appendix in the Dropbox.
Sorry, in the Dropbox. Okay. So there is the appendix, correct? And in this appendix is
this document.
Yes, it's the agenda setting policy. That is what the board approved back in October 7th, I believe. It's on here. I don't know if it's on there. Okay, but the board approved this document already.
Okay.
So we're not approving this document again.
No.
Just approved,
But
yeah.
On that notion, I just.
The appendix is a collection of all policies and procedures that the organization already has.
But do you recognize my concern that I think that
I do, but I don't think we're not voting on a new agenda setting policy.
okay.
We're voting on a document to orient new board members.
Agreed.
And then for your concerns about agenda setting, we can talk about it more in a few minutes, if that's
All right.
okay. Okay, so, sorry, so Pete, do you have anything else to add?
So I guess, if we're adopting a guide, but not specifically, are you trying to adopt this guide as worded exactly as it is now?
I am trying to adopt this guide, and I'm trying to adopt this as a method of a starting place for new board members and existing board members.
Well, but
There-
adopting a method is different than adopting this guide.
Correct. But this is
This is your means to an end.
this is the means.
Okay.
Correct. Margie?
I don't have any problem with what's being presented. I think it's a good idea and we should go forward.
Okay.
So here's the concern. We had a lot of documents given to us on Friday with 2 days to read them, and this is a 40-page orientation guide. And I feel like some of these things require an in-person presentation of like the thought and the rationale versus us sitting alone in our silos and reading this and then having valuable feedback to contribute. Another thing I wanted to mention was that when you say adopt and then we have the opportunity to change it later, I think there was a real example of like we really don't have the opportunity to change it later because Frank brought up changing the agenda setting policy and you'd mentioned, but that was something
No,
we
any
said.
policy can be changed at any time. You
Yeah.
can put it on the agenda, we can discuss it, it can be changed. So I think what he's saying is what's in there now is what's exists right now. Those are the policies that exist right now. If we want to change them, we can do that. So, but we gotta start with something first.
Right.
Then we can go and then amend it.
But starting with something that, again, we haven't all, have you read the whole thing?
No, but I trust in what we're
Right.
doing here, and I think there has to be some sense of trust among ourselves that we are all working towards the same goal, which is to have a school that addresses the needs of the children first, and then everyone else as well. And so I don't think there are any ulterior motives here, and I think we need to get away from that all the past that's happened. We've been through a whole lot of upheaval, and I think right now we're in a good place. We need to go forward, trusting each other, working together, and knowing that things are gonna be better, because we now have certain things in place. And so it's just a matter of starting with this, and then if we need to amend it, we can do that. So, nothing's set in stone.
So I have nothing to add.
Chris?
If I can share, the other things that were in the packet, I know it's a ton to read, and I fully recognize that. This document was not put in until today. We did not have it completed. With that being said, you know, if there's a
We can,
need
of course, table it.
to step back and say, you know what, I need a little more time to read it, put it on next month's agenda. It's not a big deal. I totally hear what Margie's saying, which is let's start by let's establish trust and not feel like we're being pushed into something. And so if it's a matter of need a little more time, let's take another month and put it on next month's agenda. That's my 2 cents on this.
Completely agree. I just want to make sure that
I'm not saying that it's not a trust issue. I'm just saying it is, you know, I've seen people being drawn into the thing, and then you need to make decisions, and there have been things bounced off. I've been in your place as a board president. I've been, so I just ask you to be careful. And my concern is that I'm not a big fan of accumulating power in one spot and in 2 spots. I actually like the idea of shared responsibilities and governance, and so agenda setting policy, while we agree to it and all these other things, I think the important piece here is how information are being disseminated and what was discussed, and if what was discussed, that everybody gets a perspective of the content on which we make the decisions for the children. That's all I'm saying.
And I think he addressed that in his presentation.
Yeah.
Consistent communication. He's going to be responsible for doing that.
So-
We're all gonna know what we're talking about.
Let's get back to the matter at hand. I'd like to make a motion that, by the way, I double checked, and President can make a motion.
You can?
Yes.
Not typically.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this discussion until the next meeting. Do I have a second?
You know, so I'm fine with moving forward with the document.
Okay.
You know, I'm fine with moving forward with the document. So I make a friendly amendment to your motion to not table the document and actually adopt the board. I've raised my concern. You know, I've raised my concern to adopt the document as presented. Do I have a second then?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No.
Okay.
Okay. In the true sense that this is a board orientation guide.
This is an orientation, I haven't been oriented.
So
You will be now I'll give you that document.
8 a.m. this morning doesn't count as an orientation, you know, when you have a full day.
okay.
All right.
Was it all other eyes?
All ayes except a nay from Danielle.
New board member.
And actually, one thing to add to this board orientation guide, I think that has to be more than just handing someone a book and say, here, read this.
Have a
I think there
conversation.
has to be a meeting with
Exactly
one of the
what I
past, well, maybe another board member to kind of walk you through it and say, well, this is because of this and this is because of that. So that's, I think.
Yeah, I think
I
that's-
also wanna say, as a new board member, oftentimes I say something and it's totally dismissed. And it's very frustrating, because then Margie said it and everybody just agreed with her, or Chris said it and everybody agreed with him. So it's incredibly frustrating as a new board member, especially to have some things like pushed down my throat and then say, you don't trust anybody, you have to trust, but at the same time, I haven't been oriented.
Someone should have sat with you
So, but.
between today and the time you were voted in. I thought that there was going to be
Yeah.
some kind of a meeting with the new board
Yeah,
members.
and so, and I agree with you, you know, and acknowledge you, and I'm sorry that I deviated from my initial comment.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, but I would say, you know, my mantra is always trust but verify, so I agree with you, so.
Okay. Moving on to 5F, adoption of vendor policy agreement and authorizer requirement. So this is presented by Dr. Jones.
Here's my dark. Second. So this was a requirement that came to us as a recommendation or a requirement from LA Unified that we develop a policy related to what we expect from our outside vendors of any sort. So this could include someone who's doing outside vending for after school, that type of programs. It could be involving consultants. It could be in any piece of that. The document is fairly simple, but the important part that LA Unified is going to be looking at is that the vendor is number 8, 9, and 10. Submitting to a background check, sign and accept the school's conflict of interest statement, the one we previously looked at, and then most importantly, number 10, abide by professional code of conduct towards students or staff and family. Failure to maintain professional code of conduct may result in termination of the agreement by the school. So that's a key piece that we need to have in there, and then we can show that we move forward on this particular issue with LA Unified and moving forward from there. There was a recommendation that we develop consider creating a form for the vendor to fill out so that all information is captured at the time. And so that we will do is switch the language on that to a form, and we'll develop that form to be able to capture that information. There was also a comment about considering adjusting to down to 1 to 2 weeks in advance. My concern on that is that we're trying to build out advanced planning and not kind of last minute. 1 to 2 weeks. 1 week certainly would be really tough to be able to move forward, but even 2 weeks, I'd prefer to see it more 3 to 4 weeks, and so I did leave that as the 1 month that was in there initially. So that's the policy that is in there, and if there's a motion or discussion.
All right, is there a motion to adopt the vendor policy and agreement as is?
I have no discussion.
We'll make the motion, then you can discuss.
Then you discuss, yeah. Second the
Adopt?
motion.
Second the motion.
Motion? Adopt.
Okay, the second.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead. Frank, do you have anything to add?
No, I can't.
Pete?
Not to complicate this any more than these things already are, but I just throw this out as a question that maybe we want to consider in the back of our mind. So, for example, in terms of where we spend our money, so the California State University system, for example, doesn't allow state funds to be used to do business in certain states because of policies that these states have. So I'm just curious whether or not we would like to adopt such a policy as well. Now, that raises a lot of questions about which things we find, I lost the vocabulary right there. Which things that states do that we don't like, and whether or not we can agree as a board. But there could be some things that, we may say we don't want any vendors that are based in Arkansas because Arkansas as a state has particular policies that we as Goethe International Charter School that's open and blah, 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 disagree with. Now, that makes the vendor policy much more complex, but also, it also kind of puts our money where our mouth says, is that we say, you know, we believe in, we have these beliefs, this is our mission, and this company comes from a state that is opposed to that mission, and so we don't want to spend our money there. Just, you know, food for thought, we don't have to do it now, maybe it's something in the future as we look into it, you know, just something to keep in the back of your mind. That's the comment I would make.
Do you know the background of the vendor policy? Because, I mean, it had nothing, I mean, okay, I understand what you're saying, and I know the city of Los Angeles does that from time to time. They don't like something that's happening somewhere and they will write a policy. So those can be policies that stand alone, because I don't know that you'd want to incorporate into this vendor policy and have it go on into the future. I think if there's issues like that, that can be a separate statement, policy statement that can be done at that time, because I don't know of anything at this point, and I would hope that we would have all our vendors in California for one thing. So anyway, yeah, I'm okay with the way it's going.
I don't have any comments.
Pete, that's very interesting. It is interesting, and I think I agree with Margie. I think if something like that does come up, I think the proper channel is probably to do an assessment of where that could be, and take it from there into the statement.
I'm not
Yeah.
wedded to the idea that we need to complicate this. I'm just thinking that, you know, part of our role is to take a larger view of things, and where you put your money is, you know, you vote with your feet, and that's one way of doing it.
All right. All in favor of adopting the vendor policy and agreement? Aye. Okay, item 5G, election of board secretary. Just received some information that our candidate for the board secretary, we no longer have a candidate for board secretary, so I would like to table this vote until into the future. So, do I have a motion to table?
I motion to
Okay.
table. I motion.
Seconded by Pete. We will table it until further notice.
And as executive director, we're supporting the minutes right now and have for the past couple of, so we have two folks who are helping us. Thank you, Vicky, thank you, Casey, who are helping capture our minutes, and
But the board, you know, was in the shared responsibilities, right? The board secretary is also the keeper of the bylaws, you know, and make sure that, you know, that we are.
Not necessarily the keeper, but the person who knows where they are.
That knows where they are and is our first role, so.
Correct.
You know,
It is-
so there is shared responsibility as an important position, so we need to fill in.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to the last item. So, board development. One of the things, you know, we talked about agenda setting policy today. One of the things I would definitely like to reserve for our group during every board meeting is spending a dedicated amount of time to board development in a constructive way. That being said, I would like this organization, as everyone knows, to become a much more professional organization. It's in our best interest for the expansion of Goethe that we operate as if we are a larger school and a bigger school than I think that we are. So this graphic is in the board orientation guide. It's nothing controversial because this is what pretty much every school and charter school operates at, where parent concerns and issues from parents, they go to the teacher, they get elevated to the principal, they go to the executive director, and they go to the board. I think one of the conversations I've heard, or one of the talking points from a few years ago, was who oversees the board. nobody oversees the board oversees the school. And we have to keep in mind that this is the chain of command of the organization. I wanted to open up to discussion because as long as we follow the rules of governance and best practices, then we are the body that you know, where the buck stops here as far as the organization is concerned. Anyway, that being said, are there any comments about the slide, Frank?
About the slide, no, the board has been overseen by, is controlled by statute. By statute and by the authorizer, so this board doesn't act in vacuum, so that's the only comment I would make. So whatever we do here has to be in compliance with what is typically expected by law, and so the board is not an isolated body, which is, you know, cannot be charged. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Margie? Danielle?
I would also agree. The sense that nobody oversees the board, again, we do need to be within compliance, but what's then the role of governance? So governance, wouldn't governance be there to also advise the board as sort of a wing of the board to say, this is in compliance, this isn't?
Correct. So that would be us developing policies that is good governance. So I know Frank, so just to step back to what Frank pointed out as far as the authorizer. You are correct, the authorizer has a lot of sway in the organization, but we don't report to the authorizer. We stay in compliance with the authorizer, we fulfill their requirements, but the authorizer can't come in here and say, I don't like Frank's glasses, get him out of here. That's a board decision. So to address Danielle's point, I like your glasses, Frank, I'm just kidding. To address Danielle's point, good governance comes from policy, and good governance comes from this board getting together to make effective policy. So, you know, one of the things we talked about is the board activity calendar, right? It's my goal that when I'm long and dead, actually no, or if I'm not here, next year or 6 months from now, or I'm hit by a bus, that this organization is something to move forward to where those things don't happen anymore. There's transparency on board meetings or things that are happening that we're putting in place that affected 2021 and 2020 and 2021. That is how the board devises or sets up its plan.
But what if it's noticed that we're not in compliance? So if say, for example, the governance committee, because we can't, you know, I know we say we report to LAUSD, right? Not formally, but nobody would ever kind of out the board to LAUSD because in the school would potentially be in trouble. You know,
Sorry, you said out.
Out the
Out,
board.
okay,
Yeah,
yep.
right, or to like, you know, the charter association.
Right.
That would be dangerous territory, right? So in the event that the board is in some sort of violation, is it expected that the governance committee would kind of raise that as that sort of policy?
So not necessarily. So the way, so there's a few things we can do, right? So let's look at, let me address this. So we can instill the board development committee, right? We can pick 3 board members or 5 or all of us, okay? And we can have them oversee the board if we so wanted. That's a board decision, and we can define that by policy. And I don't know if we would do that. That's a conversation.
No, my question is more of like if it was.
If there's a violation
if there was notice that they noticed that we were in violation of compliance.
Right. And that would be the responsibility of the executive director to bring forth to the organization and say, there's a serious risk here. We need to fix it right now, and then the board would take it from there.
Can I just share a thought? Because I think everybody's onto a good path of what it is, and I think the one question you had at the beginning of well, who monitors the board? It's not no one. It's the board who monitors the board. You monitor yourself, which is where governance comes into it, where I come into it and help guide you that as well. But the board monitors itself, and that's a hard thing to do, because in a non-charter world, the board, yes, monitors itself, but they are also voted on by the public, and we don't have a general vote. We do have parent members who are voted on, but that's not across the board, and so it is up to all of us to make sure we're doing the right thing. So I think that's why we're putting this agenda point on here for exactly to have these kind of like self-reflective discussions, so we do not end up back in the spiral that we all witnessed happen previously. So that's kind of where I think we're at. It's up to us to figure it out around this table.
And I think to that point, I mean, at this stage, since the board is relatively small, I think issues of development and government should be taken up by the entire board, and there should be time set aside at the board meeting so that everyone can attend, a small chunk of time. Because even when we had whenever there's a committee, the report back to those committees sometimes have, back to Frank's point, I mean, there is a different lens that everyone reports back with, and so since governance is important, since accountability is, we're supposed to be accountable to ourselves, I think it's the best way to accomplish that is to do it as a group, and that way we all have shared responsibility in the room at the same time, and people can not participate, but stakeholders can see how that governance is taking place. It's not three people just met and said we should do X, Y, Z. It's shared responsibility that way.
Something else I would like to just advise everyone on is that this, it's called board member referral. When I first joined the board, I felt it was my place to hear the concern of stakeholders, whether it's parents, teachers, etc., etc. But ultimately, that's really not our role. It's our role to make sure that we have policy and plans in place to make sure that the school is running effectively. But we should be constantly, if we are getting concerns from stakeholders, we should be referring them to their right places. But duly following up on it to make sure that those things
To the
are
right place, to the executive.
to
the
right,
executive.
exactly, to the executive
That's
director.
it.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually,
Mm-hmm.
it's if it's at the teacher level, classroom level, it's to the teacher. If it's to the school level, it's to the principal, so that we have these layers of elevation.
But if the board's getting it, it's coming to you. If it's coming to me, it's gotta go back to you. And actually I have another thing to say about this too, is that, board development includes board recruitment, and governance actually is evaluation of the board members. Not only for how they are doing their jobs, but also to determine what skills are missing so that you can go out and recruit those missing skills. So that has to be included in this whole discussion as well.
So, thank you. To Margie's point about development, I think that is something that and to Pete's point, it is something that I want to take every board meeting, have a conversation about, so that there are no surprises, that it's transparent, we're having an open conversation, it's not coming through multiple people. But everything that we discuss, ultimately that's my goal as the board president, is to lay the foundation of this organization going forward. Not to say that rules can't change, policy can't change, board members can't get hit by a bus, but it's ultimately to define those policies.
You're gonna curse us.
But, and you're right, Margie, as an individual, anytime you get a complaint from a constituent, you can say, Chris, here you go, I'm not even looking at this. I might send it to the principal, or I might send it, did you talk to your teacher yet? Okay, well, I hope that works out, you know what I mean?
So I think we should be uniform in that.
Uniform, correct.
Right.
And that's why
Because what's going to happen is they're going to say, oh, I'm not sending anything to Margie because she's just sending it to the ED. I'm going to go to this here because he's great. He's going to talk to me and he's going to talk to the teacher. So you're going to get all the complaints.
No, I wouldn't talk to the
fun.
teacher. I'm not saying I would talk to the teacher. I would say, this is the referral. You have a problem with this, go to the teacher. I'm not talking to the teacher. That's not my responsibility.
No, I know. I'm just saying that the level of commitment needs to be equal for all of us. People are
So
shopping
I have a
around
question about
board
that, within the response, because, we received an email today, right, from a family that's not returning, and I think everybody on the board got that email, I read it literally as I was sort of red light. And, naturally they wanted to be heard by the board, and so in that example, it seems like the right response would be to tell Dr. Jones to ask him to respond or handle however
Which I
he
shared
likes.
with him as soon as I walked in.
However, would there then be opportunity, because people want to feel heard by the board, right? So in my mind, the response might have been, you know, a great opportunity for the board to hear your concerns would be to attend a board meeting, right? Is that appropriate then as a response? Because then we're ignoring, as you call them constituents, I call them parents, well, we're ignoring parent concerns. And that, you know.
I didn't see that there was any, anything to talk about. They made their decision and that was it. They're just letting us know that that was their decision. I shared it with Chris as soon as I came in, he hadn't had a chance to see it. You know, it's, I don't know. I don't know that there's, what the response.
If I can kind of share, kind of my thought, I think it's more of, we want to not give a sense that we're just pushing the problem away.
Right.
And I think that we can listen, and we can also ask some questions. For instance, that, you know, someone's concerned, hear their concern for sure. I mean, we want to be open and to be listening. But you could ask the question, oh, you know, this was a concern that happened in the classroom. Did you have a chance to talk to the teacher about it? Then they may have. Oh, we did that and we had a meeting and that didn't go well. Oh, great. Did you have a chance then to talk to the principal about that, or in some cases it would be the assistant principal? Just kind of guiding them so that it doesn't feel like we're pushing it off. And absolutely, to Marge's point, I can be of help in either working through a problem with a parent or guiding them to the right person who can work through that problem. We are never going to make everyone happy, but we certainly are receptive to trying and to working towards listening and responding and doing things that are appropriate. And again, if we keep in mind we're trying to make decisions what's best for kids, then we're going to be, that's, you know, our North Star. We're going to be heading in that direction no matter what way we do it. But I think a lot of it is just listening and kind of guiding them through the process. And sometimes people are very upset and it's hard to get them to a better place. And the more we listen and then say, okay, and I'm going to follow up and I will get a hold of somebody who can deal with it.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you know, parents, stakeholders, constituents, they should absolutely be heard, and their input is important. I mean, that's why we have open comment and all of that. My concern is that we develop a culture where parents will find a favorable board member to bend their ear at various functions, and then this forms factions and it creates rumors, and because casual comment, just a random comment can create all sorts of wacky things and impressions that we really wouldn't want individual board members. You don't want to mix policy with opinion, and sometimes the board member thinks they're being very clear by saying, well, you know, it's not our policy, but I kind of agree with you, and that turns into, well, you know, so-and-so thinks the board policy ought to be X. And, you know, we just go down this road, whereas it's a little bit colder, and again, you don't want to turn that faucet off, it's a little bit colder, but to have a very clear process that people go to the same way, everyone is treated equally. I don't listen to one parent more than the other parent because of whatever reason. Every parent's told the same thing. I think it just, once that routine gets set, then no one will feel slighted by it because they know that's the routine. People will feel slighted when they know that somebody else didn't follow that routine. That's when you start having problems. So I think you have to set the routine of what it is, and then just stick that everyone sticks with it, and then people will be happy.
So in that situation, we wouldn't respond, right? We would let Dr. Jones handle it. So I'm just trying to think of the parents who want to feel heard by the board, right? Because parents want to feel heard by the board. So is then the opportunity there to not respond at all, or to say, I encourage you to attend a board meeting, or for Dr. Jones then to say that if you'd like to address this with the board, I encourage you to attend. Because, you know, when they're seeing the hierarchy, right, and they maybe wanted to go to the top, they wanted to, and that's a different example, right? The one that we got today, that's something where a family withdrew and that was different, but there could be another concern where they want to elevate it higher, and we should be accessible in some way, and is this the way?
Well, we have public comment. at the beginning of every meeting.
Right,
Yeah.
is that, well, so our.
We just don't respond to the comment,
Well, I mean,
but we
right,
can't discuss
our
it.
comment could be,
Yeah.
our response could be that either to talk to Dr. Jones or come do public comment before. I mean, we can decide what that is, I'm not saying,
Yeah.
I'm not advocating for anything that we just,
So-
what it is, I'm just saying we should
We
decide, and then that's what our, you know,
Right.
those are the, if there's three options we wanna reply to in our emails or personal communications, let's figure out what they are,
Right.
so that, again, that it's
Right.
fair and consistent,
So there is a good old, it's a traditional way of, it's done, it's existed in Germany for centuries. It's called the Kummerkasten. It's basically something we have like a literally translated as a little box where you can put your concerns in.
Suggestions box? No.
Is
that what you're talking
No, it's not a suggestion
No.
box. Suggestion box is something, it's a positive spin. The
Oh,
Kummerkasten is a negative spin. So you have a complaint.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah?
But,
So you have a complaint.
Yeah. What you call it? It's a Kuma what?
Kummerkasten, Kummerkasten. It's a very, it could be a mailbox. It can be monitored. Where people are kind of saying, okay, here's something, it can be monitored. It's an official comment. We monitor it, so everybody has a shared responsibility. Everybody goes in and monitors it and then communicates with us. It creates an additional avenue where maybe this is not necessarily, it's a trusted document, it's a trusted inbox, but it gives people another access point.
But I
And
think
it's-
what's very important is, especially when we get these emails that come to us, all of us, we can't respond to them,
No,
because
you
we
shouldn't.
cannot respond individually. We can
Right.
only respond as a board. So that means we look at it, and then it's up to the executive director and the board president to determine how they're going to move forward. Bringing them to a meeting, discussing the issue, and putting it on the agenda, whatever, but it should not be for individual board members.
So in order to, it's about policy, so you create an avenue where people really can raise their concern outside of the board meetings, and it's officially, so it is officially submitted, therefore it needs to be dealt, and then the process is,
A response needs to go.
a response needs to be drafted by,
So,
the executive director.
so just to add to everything that's sort of been discussed, so Margie highlighted one of the pieces of that as far as communicating, this email came in from a parent to all the board members. There's a certain amount of risk, obviously, if a board member communicates directly with somebody. So that always has to be sort of front of mind for us. There's compliance issues that anytime there's an email that it is public record, so that's also another consideration. But let me give you an example of when I started on the board and I would get those communications. What I recognized was that many of these parents had felt like they had gone through the proper venue and that they were not heard, which is absolutely right. They followed that chain of command and it came to the board. In my capacity, what I would say, because we didn't have an executive director, I didn't have the authority to go tell Casey or teacher, go handle this. The only thing I could do is bring it forth in an agenda in a meeting and say, hey, we need to get this on a board meeting so we can have that discussion, but also communicate back to that person. And I was doing this because we didn't have anyone, right? There was a vacuum. We have a person who's absolutely responsible for that right now. That is their job, is to take all of this. If anything is coming to the board, related to the board, that is their responsibility to manage effectively, communicate with our input, and bring forth to us. But it's also our responsibility to say, hey, Chris, what happened to that email from that parent? When are we gonna talk about that at the next board meeting? And Chris can say, well, it's a non-issue or it is an issue and I'm gonna bring it forward. But I think it's also, us having some trust in Chris to make sure he's elevating things forward, but also he's managing things in the back end to make sure that, I'll be honest with you, emails coming to the board, it's very rare. If the board is functioning and the organization is functioning the way it should, it's very rare that parents or constituents should be reaching out to the board. Those are my two
Wait until we get to divisive issues. You know?
Well, we will know well in advance when we're getting into the divisive issues, and I'm gonna take that day off.
Yeah. No, but like, I think what, you know, it just sharing, not to belabor the issue, I was just went this morning as a vendor to the Burbank Hollywood Airport board meeting, and it's all about flight patterns and noise and who's saying, and all of it, I mean, it was Hollywood-esque.
They all are.
They all are, and it's not isolation to this, not, so it's not just this board which has to deal with the but it's about, I think my biggest takeaway was while I was multitasking, listening to the board meeting, is that there was no avenue for them. They had no jurisdiction about the fact. That's the FAA, right? They're just facilitating this, but they were being attacked on non-transparency issues, on not being heard. And it dawned on me and said, well, what if there is a record that we took it in and then there is an official response? So along those lines, right, so once you create a mechanism to where you channel the concerns, and you acknowledge it, you know, and then there is a way you can say, no, we heard it, but and then there's an answer. So their fault is that they wouldn't be answering directly, or they couldn't be answering directly to the stakeholders. Or I don't know what, there was a breakdown. And this happens here quite often. So you need to create an avenue how to acknowledge the conversation. And so the Kumakasan is one element of it.
So I think it's a really good idea. I think, because my concern is that we have a lot of parents that are very committed and motivated, and they're able to show up and they participate and they can write down and make a comment. And maybe this is an avenue through which they can place a comment that gets read at the board meeting, so people can have input without having to show up. Because some people can, right?
Right.
And your job is
Or,
getting
you know,
right.
somebody, Dr. Jones can reference in the executive director, we have received so many comments this year for the next months, and the comments when I'm summarizing it, and he's not going into detail for privacy reasons, because in order to be it needs to be confidential, right? So it needs to be something, you know, that people can trust and can be done. I mean, conceptually, I'm not sure that's the right way, but it could be a way.
But some issues can be the parent can say, you know what, the bathrooms are a mess and they're completely, you know, and that's a comment they want to make, that we need to do something about the bathrooms. They can't come to the meeting, but they can put it in your box, and that can be read, and then we hear
But
it.
you could also open Pandora's box, right? You could get 1,000
But I think
emails.
it's important to have recurring issues that, you know, are addressed, because if several parents are addressing them, then it's probably a problem with a larger scope of parents, and we're not seeing that because not all of them are complaining.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of, like, it technically becomes FAQs, right? Instead of frequently asked questions, it's frequent complaints. And then we can address publicly, again, by people want to feel heard by this board, and so then they're acknowledged in a way that's more public, and maybe that kind of helps ease a little bit of the tension.
And the executive director can then decide, okay, we cannot do this or this or this, and this is the genesis of it. They can provide content about it, because we can't, we shouldn't.
Well, and you can decide whether you can just address it.
Exactly.
So,
It's done, and the board is
Can we
meeting.
give the floor to Heidi for a second?
no, not
Can I?
necessarily. No. So,
I'd like to.
just we have 12 minutes until the end of the meeting. I know Heidi, and just bear with me. So, I would just like to point out that Chris, on his presentation today, as far as internal, external communication, there was a slight bit there as far as board matters. So I would leave it to you. You've taken our input back as far as the custom. Thank you. And you've heard some of our concerns and making sure that things are managed, that we are on top of these things that are appropriately board related, that we need to stay on top of, and bring that forward in your communication plan. So with that being said, I just want to get through this slide, and Heidi, I will hear you, even though we are not allowed to address the public in board meetings. Anyway, so we'll try to get through this really quickly. This is another page on the board orientation guide. I've shared this before. as far as what the, if there was one graphic on what good governance is, we oversee and we manage, we monitor our plans to see that they're working, we have a vision, we have some shared goals, and then we adopt policies. That's really the role of this of our group here, this committee. Everything else is that guy over there, and how he gets to those things that we want. One of my realizations when I came onto the board, and I'm on several boards, and I've also been on several school boards, but very different from this, where I was of the impression that I would get to the board, I would start a committee, I would roll up my sleeves, and I would just start churning out work. That's not really our job. Our job is, if we want to get involved in the organization, absolutely start a committee, but get involved. But we have to have a certain amount of objectivity in our roles. The school will be more successful if we stay in our lane and make sure that the people that we've appointed to do their jobs are doing them well. We have to make sure Chris is doing his job well. We have to evaluate him on his goals and his priorities. Stay less out of the weeds on, why the bathroom isn't getting clean, but making sure that there's a plan in place that Chris is checking the bathroom every couple of days.
Or delegating.
Somebody.
Sorry, yes. Don't go in there. But that it's kind of a fine line, and I think we're on this board because we are all successful professionals and successful career professionals in our own right, and we want to solve problems. But this organization is not going to last. And I use this reference again. If Frank gets hit by a bus, we have to make sure that the organization can survive on its policy and on its own merits. Anyway, any comments about this?
I'm going to do a bait and switch. So I agree with this, but you have to switch. I want to make sure that we don't put our executive director in a position to where his time is too much time spent developing an agenda. I want to managing the school.
Okay. So last slide. We have 9 minutes. I'll try to keep this brief. So communication flow. So Chris has a schedule that he's going to talk about a little bit on how much time he needs, and please rest assured that the person who was on my butt for the last 3 or 4 days and sending me an email at 10 o'clock last night was, where are you with this? Where are you with this? Because you're right, things are coming too late, and we are going to get on a better footing. So it is our goal that by September that materials are prepared well in advance, that the proposed topics of the board meeting are clear and concise and discussed or reviewed and vetted. So Chris will talk a little bit about that. One of the things that Chris is doing right now is he's sending an update to the Board of Trustees. That being said, there would be potentially 3 total updates that you would receive from Chris on a regular basis. Not, actually, the 4th one is our meeting, sorry. So you would probably receive, you'd get 2 emails every month, every couple of weeks apart, and then another email regarding the board meeting, correct?
What I was hoping to do is at minimum, between board meetings in that month, you'd get at least 2 updates from me. And I thought about weekly, it's too much. I'm not trying to, but too much happens if we don't let you keep you up. So I thought 2 times a month seems reasonable. If it turns out that's too much or too little, we'll figure that out later, but I'd like to start there. And on one of those, I would also attach the agenda so that everybody could see where we're at. What I'm going to base the agenda on is on what's listed on the board calendar for that month, plus anything that we pushed forward we didn't get to from the previous month is also going to be there. So I would, before doing that, I would have an initial conversation with the board president to to say, okay, here, where do we start with, what do we have? So that at least 2 weeks in advance, you have a clear picture of the agenda in the format that we're gonna use. So it's like not, so it's clear. So we'll have this to you guys, I'm gonna say 2 weeks ahead of the board meeting. So that if there's issues, we need to know, and I need a turnaround from you guys within, I'm gonna say 2 days, 48 hours seems reasonable, to be able to read it and say, oh, we forgot something agenda-wise. Because once we have that, we know what we're building, we're gonna build out the folders, and we're gonna fill those folders, and we'll fill them and we'll fill them. The expectation is that by the time of the Brown Act requirement, we'll also have those folders completed. We had most of them completed this time by that time, but not all of them. And I'll tell you, it's just, you know, we're starting school, we're scrambling, and everybody's new, so I apologize for the empty ones. But I think that's a reasonable expectation. If we've got 2 weeks to know what the folders are that we have to fill. And so the problem is, if everybody, like a week before, says, oh, add this or add that, and I'm not saying there's not gonna be exceptions, there will. But that can't be the regular.
Right.
And so if we're able to do that, I think we're gonna succeed in getting you enough time to read the things that you need to read, because we'll actually start filling the folders well in advance. The idea is that it's totally filled, ready to go, with the weekend to read it if we need it. So does that sound like a reasonable way to go forward at this point, and we can change it later if we need to?
Okay, so if you're gonna give us 2 weeks in advance, you're gonna give us an update that's basically the agenda coming up.
Yeah, the draft agenda.
What other update would you give us, and when would that be?
So, like for instance, I would probably have an update now coming up in the next week that just gives you, hey, we got the opening of school, here's some things, and so it might depend on the time of year that we're at. So right now, I would expect to have a board update coming out at the end of this week or early next week to give you just kind of the quick and dirty. If we have the agenda ready to go, I attach that there, and then have another one just before the board meeting, so that here's the update. So maybe just before within like 4 or 5 days of the board meeting. So those would be the 2 windows that I talked about. So ideally, the first one of the month that you would see it has the agenda for coming up, and then another one just before the board meeting. Does that seem reasonable?
So I look at it, he's gonna give us 3 updates a month, 1 in a board meeting, the other 2 in an email.
Oh, yeah.
That seems too much to me.
Well,
Is that too much?
I think the communication you've had with us this past week has been fine. I really enjoyed that you letting us know, you know, this is happening, that's happening. And I think it's just, I don't know that there's a way that you can say, yes, it's gonna be 2, or maybe it's gonna be, I think it's gonna depend on what's happening throughout the year. So I think whenever you're comfortable sending us something, and your emails are not that long, they don't take a lot of time to
I
go
try to be
through.
brief.
Yeah, and so I think what you've done is fine, and I think if that continues, I'm okay with it, so. I don't want you to tie yourself to, like, it has to be 2, or it has to be this week, or that, you know, it just don't create
Also-
expectations.
Also keep in mind Frank's comment about, you know, because I think that's what you're asking for is, like, Chris and I are not enumerating the curriculum choices of the 6th graders, you know what I mean, every few days. Chris's emails are pretty much,
It's
you know,
about access to information for me, that's
Yeah.
all there is to it. You know, I trust everybody, but I've seen it, you've been sucked into it, and so it's, some items shouldn't be discussed, and, you know, and then the board president discussed the items with the executive director, you know, agendas are being framed around it, they're not gonna be, it's a dangerous, a slippery slope.
Noted.
Noted.
and
On that notion also, when you talk about agenda, within public companies, when there is an official annual meeting, this is not an annual meeting, right? But it would be helpful if you say there is items for adoption or recommendation, we vote on it, that the executive director or the sponsor writes a 2-line executive summary recommending or rejecting the item on the agenda. The item is to adopt the policy, then the policy then just paraphrased in one sentence, the policy is about X, Y, Z. We recommend to adopt.
So that's sort of the what kind of content we're putting into the agenda.
Yeah.
I've tried very hard to make sure our agendas are more descriptive.
Yeah.
Depending on the topic, it may not be feasible, and I'm just not thinking that far ahead.
Yeah, but
And,
just or conceptually,
you know,
or oppose it, don't put it on the agenda, issue a recommendation, which
During
you would
the-
do
during
put it in the Dropbox and make it part of the document and say,
So who would the would it be the sponsor of the motion, or the
well, it's
executive
mostly,
director?
I may say mostly executive director is
Okay.
proposing, so executive director is proposing to adopt LCAP.
Okay,
Quick rationale
Got it.
behind it.
so let's talk about
Yeah.
that.
Why would we put something on the agenda that we
No,
put it
not on the-
to
but
be
it's-
accepted? It's, you know, why would it be on the agenda if
No,
it
no,
wasn't
I-
something that we want,
I
that we
get you.
didn't wanna adopt? So
I-
I would think that,
You can
anyway,
adopt it,
yeah,
so-
I think you saw the airport commissioner agenda, that's the way they write theirs. I
No,
know.
the airport
port
agenda,
doesn't.
actually, the airport agenda was exactly like ours.
Well, I know the port, they have a recommendation, that it is recommended,
Yeah,
recommended
staff
that this is-
recommendation,
yeah,
and staff
yeah,
recommends to do
yeah.
this, and it's
Right.
not just in public hearing, it's
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
pre-formulated.
So also keep in mind, again, going back to our calendar and our activities and our shared goals,
Mm.
that there should be very few surprises, you know what I mean?
Absolutely,
That-
yeah,
that-
I agree.
You know,
It's
and
very
I'm,
intended.
so we can talk about elaborating further on that.
Yeah,
So think about it.
if I could, let me think about that,
Yeah.
how we can make,
Yeah.
I totally get what you're saying, and I've seen that in other organizations, let me think about how we can
Yeah.
operationalize.
Just-
Or even if there's just a general presentation at the meeting, right? So for something that's a 40-page document, that's a lot of information to digest, and it's hard to say, like, I trust that this was written well, because isn't the role of the board to give feedback and to be able to provide, based on our
Yeah.
business expertise and our backgrounds, some feedback if possible and comments to even improve maybe what's already laid out. So, for something like that, it would be helpful to have an in-person presentation to understand, even if it's 5 minutes, the rationale behind it and what's included.
I'd just like to point out that that slide was here.
No, we're not saying, no, that was not the point, but in general, as a concept.
Okay, so we're getting close to end, I'm sorry. The last thing I just wanted to show on this slide and questions and concerns, please, I ask that everyone on the board, meaning Chris is our liaison to the organization. So if you have questions about the school, about the operations, the day-to-day operations, how the vendor policy agreement's going, if it's not something that's covered by the board during a meeting, please engage him. He is our primary contact with the organization. I say that because, a few of us have been on the board for the last year, and before Chris was here, we would engage the administrative team. We would, who knows who to talk to, but we all have to be uniform in our communications and making sure that all the information that is shared with us, that we share with them, is coming from one person, and that's Dr. Jones. That being said, are there any other questions about board development before we move to the next item? Okay. Proposed topics for next board meeting. It is on the activity calendar. Chris will also send out another note on the topics for September. Yes, Frank?
I'd like to add that you could, potentially formulate your internal communication policies, so that we have a document. It's not on this one. I think it's an urgent matter so that we have clarity and role clarity. It helps with role clarity, shared responsibilities. It's on the overall, I'm not sure whether
I
it's.
think it might be in October, so to be moving it up from October?
Yes,
I'm just by memory.
No, I looked through October. It's not in October. Maybe I've not seen it. but-
Adopt school communication strategy and channels. It's number 12. Let me see what it is. Okay, but we'll note it. You want to?
Yeah.
You want to?
I want to see.
It's-
I
it's
want
not
to see your
October.
entire plan, how you think it through. By then, you should be able to think through how you communicate internally. What the external communication is a development thing, but internally you should have made your.
So it is on the calendar for October.
Can we move it forward?
Well, let's see September. Ooh.
Can we, so here's my thing about September. Are we then also already talking about, school site development?
Yeah.
Is that necessary already then, when we are, it's just 1 year in school, can we table this, can we switch this out?
For which
School expansion
He
funding.
wants your communication piece instead of school site.
Well, that piece actually won't be very long. It'll just be preliminary 5 minutes where we are, so we don't necessarily have to kick it, but there are some other things that we're.
that would probably be in my update, but I can try to push forward.
Yeah, it doesn't have to
in
be a
September
board, it
on
doesn't have to
that.
be
Yeah.
a board.
I mean, we're gonna, it's on the laundry list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just crank
so
it
I
out.
was just prior to, and so that's just that.
Okay. There's nothing further. Everybody good? Moving on to new business, I would just like to point out that we had just received information that Omar Joseph is disenrolling his child from Goethe and effective immediately resigning from the Board of Trustees. We will try to have a conversation about this at our next board meeting and discuss next steps and.
Shouldn't the parents have an election?
There is an election that
Okay.
has to, yes.
Why do we have to wait till next week?
Because there was, the election process and,
Oh.
there was,
Yeah.
we
We wanna
need to
do it
lock
right.
that down,
Yeah.
making sure that all of that is clear and irrefutable, and so it will come back to us, but we are duly,
Happens soon.
we're duly notified and we are going to proceed on that. Lastly, I just received this public comment from Mr. Totem. I don't think you signed up before the meeting, but this is not, if it's okay, I'll start with maybe.
Well, I have one item before we.
Oh, sorry, for new business.
So for
Yes,
new
go
business,
ahead.
I went back to accept, because the board asked me to.
Oh, yes,
the
yeah.
the contract.
Yeah.
I forwarded to you and Billy today with the request to organize, to schedule finance committee meetings. I went back, so there is another credit available, so review the document, we should discuss this in the finance committee meeting. There's also a review of, we reviewed the contracts, and so what we're actually getting with the contract, so let's review this in the finance committee meeting, but there is a credit available.
Oh, great.
Okay, not a big one, there's some incident.
Excellent.
That's all.
All right, so if that is last for new business, I would then like to ask Mr. Totem. We are not obliged, because it is the end of the meeting, we can't communicate back, but please go ahead.
So, my name's Phoenix Totem. I'm a fifth grader's parent who is my son. He started here in kindergarten. There were 4 things I wanted to bring up, and I wasn't going to say anything, but I watched the course of the meeting, and I have some concerns, and I think since there are very few parents here, Heidi's here, but I don't see anybody else here, I think it's important for me to bring them up. Number 1, my first point was about Omar. I wanted to know why he isn't here, and now I found out he just announced that he's resigned. So that's a big question mark, and I'm sure a lot of parents are going to want to know what happened and why. Transparency, he's one of 2 brand new board members that were coming in on behalf of the parent community, and to find out late in the meeting that he's left the school, I think is significant. So some sort of explanation promptly, maybe even tonight, something to give the parent community as to why he stepped down would be appreciated. The second thing I wanted to emphasize was, I remember distinctly Glynis and Biggie saying in previous years that typically there's a 5 to 10% drop off in the budgeted enrollment. And with 441, I think that's up from, I remember in the tail end of the spring was 425. And kudos to you for getting it up to 441. My question is, if we have a 10% drop off, that brings us to 400. And what are the school's reserves? I heard no real discussion tonight about the finances. I know at the tail end of the spring meeting, there was a very serious discussion about cash flow and about budget issues and cuts. And so a lot of parents are watching the optics of the board, the interaction between the members. Last year's board, I think it's no secret to anybody, was very divided, faction-wise. I understand that and correct me if I'm wrong, Michael and Lucio served through the end of their 2-year terms and no longer here. Disappointed not to see them here tonight, but I'm also more broadly disappointed to see no other parents here tonight. And I think maybe the board needs to take into account coordinating with the GPA more strongly. Would have been nice to see some board members at the kickoff meeting today, the meet and greet that Dr. Jones was at. You know, historically, I think we've had 1 or 2 board members, non-parent board members at those meetings, and I think the parent community appreciates that visibility. Going forward, you know, given where the school is at in terms of the growth plan, it would be nice to see some cohesive unity at the meetings, contrast to the almost warlike dissent that happened last year. But also, you know, reaching out into the community and engaging with it, coming to the meetings. I think we had these monthly meetings with the GPA, and there was at least one board member, or they tried to have at least one brand new board member on a rotating basis at those meetings. I think parents really appreciate that. So if Margie can come, if Pete Goldschmidt, Yassir, you know, Frank, etc., that sort of visibility is critical, and just a real sense, it creates a sense of cohesion and a common mission. The last thing I will say is, you know, apart from the optics of how all of this is going forward, one thing I didn't hear tonight, and you know, I think I speak for the 5th grade parent class, is more of a discussion of the long-term vision, right? The sales pitch as to the 6th, 7th, 8th grade and the middle school enrollment. There was no real substantive discussion of where we are in that process, and I understand it's the first meeting, and maybe you guys haven't taken any concrete steps, but I think a lot of parents are very anxious to see how the 6th grade rollout goes. I know I'm watching it, and it would be nice to have a sense that the board is proactively mapping out 7th and 8th grade. I think one of my personal concerns, whatever misgivings I may have had over the previous board membership, was that Lucio and Michael seem to be very laser focused on driving that forward, and now they're gone. So I'm sure you're all very interested in the middle school and making sure that comes off as successfully as possible. It would be nice to have talking points that speak to that at future meetings, what steps are being taken, site expansion, etc., in greater depth, and proactively communicating that with the GPA. I hope that the partnership between the GPA and the board doesn't get diluted. Again, I'm very concerned tonight that Heidi's the only GPA member here, and that there are no other parents here. And I think, you know, I don't know why that's the case. This is the first day of school starts tomorrow. There should be more parents here. And I think the board should be mindful of that so that it can help drum up parent attendance and maybe in concert cooperation with the GPA. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen to those points. And again, please pay attention to the optics. And these meetings are recorded. Everyone's watching you. You know, I watched a lot of the dissent play out last year at the meetings, and it's not good for the parent community. It'd be nice for you guys to, I understand dissent's necessary, but it'd be also nice to have the sense that, you know, you're really in this as a team with different perspectives, that you're working together to achieve the common goal of advancing students' interests collectively. So anyway, I thank you for each individually continuing to commit the time. Danielle, welcome aboard, and thank you for your points tonight. I'm very sorry to hear about Omar. I thought he was a good potential addition. And again, if there could be some sort of explanation tonight as to why this has happened, given the fact that we've lost Alex and Michael and Lucio, you know, half the experience on the board is gone. You know, it'd be nice for the parents to know what happened as opposed to leaving it an unanswered question. Thank you.
Thank you, Phoenix. Heidi.
Oh,
Best
thank
for
you.
last.
I know that you love policy and protocol, and it should be at the beginning, not the end. I appreciate it. I like that you discussed how to make parents feel heard. I was raising my hand during that moment because while I appreciate that you're discussing that, and I appreciate that you say let's move forward and focus on trust, and I'm on board, I also want to challenge you as a board to internalize what occurred last year and why you even had that discussion. I'm here 6 years, 5th and 3rd grader. I never thought I had to go to the board for anything. I have had complete trust in going to my teacher, than my principal, than my AD, and I had my issues dealt with. They were usually micro, not macro. I understood you were macro, good data, learning about the vision. I had no issue. I hope you internalize that the reason you had the email and the reason that I myself, you're looking at someone that felt fine for 4 years and felt absolutely unheard last year, is because there was no ED, there was no guidance from the board. You have a phenomenal admin staff who I adore and who cares about the kids and who should be dealing with the micro issues, but weren't given the authority to do so. So it was a complete wash last year and everyone felt it. And I hope that the discussion isn't on how do we make parents heard. It's more like how do we help the community realize that we have a phenomenal admin team that is here every day, that cares for the kids, and that knows how to deal with the problems. I don't need you to focus on my kids' issues at all. I trust these 4 people. And I think that discussion should occur, and as a board you should realize there was an issue last year, and we need to help the community trust and understand that our admin team is now strong and has the authority and power to deal with all the problems. That's why I was raising my hand.
Thank you, Heidi. And yes, protocol is very important, so thank you for waiting. I would just also like to say that in the light of turning the page and us working together cohesively going forward in the organization, I will host the first happy hour for all the board members. So it's going to be a Thursday, hopefully Tuesday, Thursday. We'll talk after the meeting, and we'll just us and have a drink, get to know each other a little bit better, and start the office first. Well, yeah, as long as you don't, it's not an open meeting. It's fine.
I motion to adjourn the meeting.
Yes. Do I have a motion? Frank, do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Meeting is adjourned at 8:16. Thank you.